Situations. I thought we did all the things that it takes to play winning football except one element. And we spoke about it after the game, and that's score touchdowns in the red zone. We had to kick field goals. And I thought Brett Smaglia did a good job in his first full-time action, not only from a field goal standpoint, but also from a kickoff standpoint as well, with the distance of his kickoffs, but also the ball placement as well. But I think there's no mystery. We're missing big plays, and we're missing big plays, big splash opportunities, not just on the offensive side of the ball, but the defensive side of the ball, and also in the special teams game. And, we're missing tackles for loss. We're missing takeaways. We need to start impacting the quarterback more. We need more big returns on special teams. And then obviously, offensively, we need big plays there. So I think it's overall one of the missing elements right now is just the big play element. But I thought it was a tale of two halves. In the second half, we just did not execute. And that was very, very disappointing. I understand as the head football coach, I am responsible for every single loss. I take every loss personally. And we're going to continue to work. We're going to continue to grind our way out of it. That's the only way I know how to do it, and we'll continue to do that. In terms of Alabama, probably the most complete football team I've seen in a number of years. All you have to do is look at their body of work through this season already. They lead the SEC in total offense and total defense. They lead the SEC in scoring offense and scoring defense. They're number one in the country in rush defense, and they have a plus 11 turnover margin. They do a great job of taking the ball away. They have 10 interceptions.
Welcome back. It's our Wednesday edition of On the Hill with Pat Jenkins Sports Talk Radio, brought to you each and every day here live by Lindsay & Associates, with locations in Fayetteville, locations also too in Rogers. Lindsay & Associates, we bring great neighbors together. It's also brought to you by Fun City. You can catch them off the 412 bypass in Springdale, and also Locomotion. They're located just below the Northwest Arkansas Mall in Fayetteville, and if you don't get a chance to catch us each and every day here live on our stream from 1 to 2, you can catch us on iHeartRadio as we take each and every day's top segment, and we podcast on iHeartRadio in the evening. So be sure and check us out if you don't get a chance to hear us each and every day. But we want to continue on as we gave you a little intro audio of head football coach Butch Jones there at Tennessee. Butch talked about a recap of just a couple of the minor things that they need to work on post South Carolina, and looking ahead to Alabama, the tall task that they have with such a very tough opponent. And we're going to get a little more in-depth as we catch up with our good buddy from the Knoxville News Sentinel, Blake ToppMeyer. Blake, welcome back to the Hill, my brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Pat.
Let's get off into it, Blake. When you look at that South Carolina game, they did a lot. Tennessee did a lot right, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, but still came up a little short. You guys had an off week. Now, coming off the off week, what has Coach Jones been able to work on with this football team that kind of gets them prepared for this tall task on Saturday?
Well, I think the biggest issue there against South Carolina was the red zone deficiencies. Tennessee had 3 trips 4 trips inside the 20 and came away with 9 points. They had 3 field goals, and then the final trip inside the 20 that got down to the 2-yard line. Game ended without Tennessee scoring. Final pass to incompletion there. That if they would have hauled it in, they would have won the game. Instead, incompletion, and they've lost their second straight, and now staring at the very real possibility of a 3-game losing streak with Alabama up next. I mean, I think that was probably the biggest takeaway from South Carolina, was just a missed opportunity. I thought the defense played pretty well. They gave up 1 long touchdown march, but otherwise, really did a nice job of keeping the team in the game. And offense wasn't great, but I feel like it did enough, except, again, inside the red zone, they went flat.
When you look at this offense with true freshman Guarantano, I believe that's how you say his name, under center, it looked to me, from my vantage point watching the game this past Saturday, there was a lot more energy with his ability to be able to use his feet and create plays when, pass plays or certain plays break down. Is that some things that they feel real good about going forward, his ability to help this offense create more diversity?
Yeah, certainly. Guarantano has a more athletic ability with his legs than the previous starter, Quentin Dormady, and that was one thing that they thought they needed, was a quarterback who could improvise whenever the pocket broke down and scramble for some yards, and we saw that quite a bit throughout the first half of that game against South Carolina. Guarantano made several good plays with his legs. The problem was he was also sacked 7 times. And not all of that was on the offensive line. There were several times where I thought Guarantano just held on to the ball too long. And you either got to throw it to somebody or throw it in the stands. You can't just stand back there forever and let the pocket deteriorate and take a sack. So I thought that was kind of a learning lesson for him. And then also they're going to have to throw the ball and stretch the field a little bit more downfield, or teams are just going to continue to load the box, because that's an adjustment I thought we saw South Carolina make in the second half. Was they really loaded up the box and tried to take away John Kelly and take away Guarantano's scrambling ability and see if they would dare throw it downfield on him, and really for the most part they didn't. And I know it's tough, a freshman quarterback of rolling the dice, but I think if you don't do that and don't show you can stretch the field a little bit, we're just going to continue to see teams load up the box and take away Tennessee's run.
Talking with Blake ToppMeyer of the Knoxville News Sentinel, talking Tennessee Volunteer football with Blake. Blake, if you have one thing that you can see on film heading into this game versus Alabama this Saturday, which, big-time rivalry game over the history, what's the one thing that concerns Coach Jones, both on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball, about this Alabama football team that's coming in there?
Everything. I mean, it's not the question you asked, but I mean, truly, that's what it is. I mean, it's Alabama, and then it's everybody else in the SEC right now. The gap is not close. The discussion used to be about how does the East close the gap with the West. Well, it's not really that anymore. I think it's how does the rest of the SEC close the gap with Alabama. They continue to show that they're head and shoulders above the rest. Texas A&M, to A&M's credit, did give Alabama a little bit of a game a couple weeks ago, but aside from that, they've just run roughshod over everybody in this conference. Their average margin of victory against SEC opponents is over 40 points. And we're talking about SEC opponents. All these coaches will have you believe that this is the greatest conference in the land. Well, if it's the greatest conference in the land, how come one team's got a 40-point margin of victory over everybody else?
Right.
It's because that one team is so much better than everybody else. And it's not just one thing, they got athletes everywhere. They take care of the ball, I think is a big thing. They don't commit turnovers. And yet they force a ton of turnovers too. So their turnover margin is great, and then on top of that, they have really good players. And I think that's what makes it so hard to upset Alabama is they just don't really seem to have a lot of chinks in the armor. And one way I think you can sometimes get upsets against teams is by the turnover margin. But when you look at it, Alabama just doesn't turn it over, and so that's why they don't lose to unranked teams. I mean, you look back at last Saturday, and we had all these ranked teams going down with Clemson losing, Washington losing, Washington State, Auburn. it seems like everyone's susceptible to the big upset except Alabama. When Alabama loses under Nick Saban, they lose to really good teams. They don't lose to 3-3 teams that have lost 2 straight like Tennessee.
Well, as always, my man, we'll come back and we'll recap this game you guys have versus the Crimson Tide, and then we'll start getting into a little talk as you guys take on the Kentucky Wildcats a week from this Saturday. But as always,
sounds good, Pat.
Thanks for taking time on the hill, my brother.
Thanks.
That was Blake ToppMeyer of the Knoxville News Sentinel talking Vols football. Those guys, Demetrius, when you really break it down and get real and uncut like we like to do here on the hill each and every day. Whew, how do they pull this upset off on the road at Tuscaloosa? How do they do it, if any?
There's no upset. So let me just make that clear right now. I think Alabama's too disciplined of a team to let a undisciplined team like Tennessee come in, especially in Tuscaloosa, and beat them. So I think it's going to be a tall task for these guys. I really don't think it's going to be a close game. I think, as Blake stated, Alabama is head and shoulders over everybody. So I think we're going to see that example this week.
Well, we're going to take us a real quick break. Then we're going to bring you a little audio of offensive lineman, big-time offensive lineman there at Alabama, Jonas Williams. He's going to give us a little take on just maybe some good words these Razorback fans would like to know about their defensive front. And also, too, following Jonas, we're going to talk a little Vols with Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama. It's on the hill with Pat Jenkins. Back in a moment.